Ramurthy Garu, Chandrasekhar Garu, Jeevan Kumar Garu, and friend from Chhattisgarh, Malini Subramaniam. Yeah, and very distinguished fighters for human rights. I express my solidarity with each one of you. And I must thank my friend V.S. Krishna. We are together studying in JNU. So for creating an opportunity to give a chance to come here to this part of Andhra Pradesh, Anantapur. I'm extremely privileged and honored to have got this opportunity to stand before you. You deserve all the salute, all the honor, all the solidarity for the struggle to uphold human rights, which are getting trampled, in today's neoliberal era. And in this context, there is kind of a silent revolution taking place in India. And that silent revolution is anchored in identifying the social structures of inequality, exploitation, exclusion, and of course deprivation. And that social structure is nothing but the caste system. In fact, B.R. Ambedkar, he defined caste system in one sentence, just one sentence, in his book, Annihilation of Caste. He said, caste system represents an ascending order of reverence and a descending order of contempt. As you go up, you will find people commanding reverence. But as you go down the hierarchy of the caste structure, you will find people treated with contempt. So that one sentence of Ambedkar, that caste system represents an ascending order of reverence and a descending order of contempt. And of course he said, Hinduism is based on graded social inequality. So that graded social inequality, if it is juxtaposed with that one sentence, ascending order of reverence and descending order of contempt, but who are those people or the groups based on caste who are, who represent that ascending order? And who are those people, again based on caste, who represent the descending order of contempt? So therefore we require to know, because this is the basis of reverence, and this is the basis of contempt. And this is there for ages together. It's not just we became conscious of it only now. Voices were raised by Buddha. He was the first person to have talked about what is called social raising up, social sympathy. And that was the voice raised in 6th century BC. So this is not a new thing. To address the issues centering around common people and how they were exploited, deprived, and treated as subhuman beings. And one of the reasons was the caste marker or caste identity. So it is therefore important to understand the numbers and for doing and to actually first number one is what is required is recognition that it is a system of exploitation, or what Ambedkar called the graded social inequality. So one has to recognize that, and then one has to count it, and then one has to frame a policy to monitor it, and then one has to adopt measures to counter that system of exploitation. And this is this is very critical in today's context because of the fact that, after 1931, caste census has never been done. And the first caste-wise survey was done in Kerala. It is not well known. First caste-wise survey was done in Kerala, which also produced Narayan Guru, who fought against caste system. It was done by EMS Namudripad communist government, which was the first elected communist government in the world history. They did it, and because of the numbers of people in the ascending order of reverence that was known, and numbers of people who were in the descending order of contempt that was known, so policies were framed by EMS Namudripad government, and of course we know that EMS Namudripad government was thrown out by employing Article 356 of the Constitution. President's rule was, imposed. The government was dismissed. And that's a part of history. It's well documented. But again, the successor of EMS Namudripad government, a communist leader, he followed it up. So today, if we have Kerala as a model of human development indices, Kerala is a model state where there is better sense of gender equality, better sex ratio, and where people are, they enjoy much better entitlements than in the rest of India. And one of the reasons was, of course, there are several reasons, historical reasons. One of the reasons to my mind is this understanding of the social structure based on graded inequality. And this graded inequality is not confined to Hinduism alone. There are people, again, within Islamic community or Christian community, where this ascending order of reverence and descending order of contempt prevails. I remember Ambedkar in the Constituent Assembly. Recently I was looking at the word secular, how often secularism was invoked in the Constituent Assembly. Every date, proceedings of every date I looked at. And in one, unfortunately I'm forgetting the date. So Ambedkar said, well, there are also backward classes among, Muslims and Christians. So therefore this inequality, the social structure based on inequality is also there among the citizens of our country who profess Islam or Christianity or maybe any other religion. And this issue of caste census has become a nationally important issue. And particularly in the context of the spread of, the consciousness rooted in Ambedkar's ideas. I was listening to a debate among two leading, let's say leading intellectuals who are frequently, appearing in YouTube channels these days. Because YouTube channels provide an alternative media, as in contrast to the Godi media or the lapdog media, which are now used used for propaganda purposes of the government. So, the one Abhay Dubey, he was telling that there was a time when frequently Marx was invoked to justify a standpoint. But now frequently Ambedkar is invoked to justify or to advance an argument. So in this kind of a rising consciousness, rooted in Ambedkar's ideas across the country, not only this country, even in many parts of the world. Because in 2007, in British House of Commons, 2 days were devoted to discuss Ambedkar's principles. 2 days I went through the proceedings of the House of Commons, and the resolution that was passed by the British House of Commons, that the British companies working in India, they must address this issue of inequality and exploitation in the name of caste. So that was in Britain in 2007, and our parliament discussed Ambedkar a few years back. And this is, London Guardian wrote an article, wrote an editorial. I have a copy of that editorial. He said, Ambedkar in 21st century, because he flagged the inequality in society and economy, and how that inequality, within that unequal structure, a constitution has been, framed, and it is being operated, which proclaims the ideal of social justice, equality of opportunity, and so on and so forth. And Ambedkar cautioned that if that inequality is perpetuated, the system itself would be blown up. Then that London Guardian referred to all those points. He said, what Ambedkar wrote in the context of India is equally applicable in the context of Britain. So there is a kind of a universal significance of Ambedkar's ideas. So it is in this context that caste census is of paramount significance, to point out those people who are in the ascending order of reverence, to find out who are those people. Because quite often, privileges are enjoyed by people when, without any question, and privileges are enjoyed when they become invisible. If we discuss about caste, well, many of us would say, hey, don't discuss about it. Because, I'm one of those persons, while growing up in Odisha, while studying in school and college, well, we never discussed about caste. Nobody was bothered about anybody's caste. But of late I have realized how it is important to discuss it, because discussing doesn't mean that one is upholding the caste identity. Discussing means to go deep into it, to understand the structure of inequality, the structure of discrimination and exploitation, which is being perpetuated in India. And therefore, by doing the caste census, we not only just count the number of castes, we also understand, actually it comes to public domain, the privileges which are associated with castes. If one goes high up in the hierarchy, and as Ambedkar said, ascending order of reverence, so those who are there in the ascending order of reverence, do they command respect and reverence just because of their caste identity, or because they have better access to resources of the society, wealth of the society, educational opportunities, health opportunities, even where they would buy a house, where they would stay, the neighborhood patterns, in our localities, in our cities, towns and villages. So, caste census is just not a census to count. It is also a census to understand who are owning the resources, who have got better access to education, who have got better access to health facilities, and so on and so forth. In other words, one would really come to know, the policymakers would come to know how privileges are enjoyed by people on the basis of their caste markers. I remember while working in Rashtrapati Bhavan with President K.R. Narayanan, one of the greatest presidents who defended the constitution, which was being attempted for review by Prime Minister Vajpayee. So when Mr. Vajpayee made his intention clear to review the constitution, I am trying to locate this idea of review of the constitution, in the context of the discussion that is taking place in Parliament. So Mr. Narayanan, as President of India, on the occasion of the Golden Jubilee of our Republic in 2000, in his speech in the Central Hall of Parliament, he put a question. Let us examine whether the Constitution has failed us or we have failed the Constitution. That question of President Narayanan made us sensation across the country. Prime Minister Vajpayee was asked, please pay heed to Mr. Narayanan's words, President's words, don't review the Constitution. And then Mr. Vajpayee appointed a commission not to review the Constitution, but to review the working of the Constitution. So this is what the President of India, who takes oath to preserve, protect and defend the Constitution, he saved the Constitution from review. And today, people are coming forward to save the Constitution. So, saving the Constitution means to uphold the cause of social justice, the cause of equality, equal opportunity, freedom of expression, the preamble which contains, people are reading now the preamble. In fact, Caste Census is an attempt to realize the objectives enshrined in the preamble itself. It's not just to count the numbers or to locate the privileges enjoyed by certain people based on certain castes. Let me now reveal literally a secret. I was asked not to share this anywhere, but let me put it here in Andhra Pradesh. When Mr. Narayanan's name was floated to become the President of India, several leaders of the Congress belonging to the high caste group, they tried to subvert the chances. And why did they do so? In fact, one leading journalist was invited by the then President of India, Mr. Sankadar Sharma, for breakfast. Mr. Harish Khare told me, Mr. Khare, I invited you to for dinner, for banquet, for breakfast, you never came, but now you will come to Rashtrapati Bhavan, because Mr. Narayanan is going to become the President of India. Then he said, but I know why you would come to Rashtrapati Bhavan. Because during Mr. Narayanan's tenure, beef will be served in Rashtrapati Bhavan. So therefore he will come now. So what was the idea behind President Sankadar Sharma inviting a journalist and telling that if Mr. Narayanan, who came from a very underprivileged background, if he would become president, beef would be made available. I asked Mr. Harish Khare, why did he say so? He said, he obviously expected me to write in the newspaper, because you are the chief of Hindu. And just imagine, chief of Hindu newspaper, chief of bureau. And just imagine, had he written that, what kind of poisonous, venomous atmosphere would have been created against Mr. Narayanan? Because in Kerala, everybody eats beef, regardless of faith. So this is how caste plays a role at the highest level. This is how President Narayanan, who was taught by Harold Lasky, teacher of Nehru, and who was in foreign service, one of the brightest Prime Minister Nehru described Mr. Narayanan in 1955 as the best diplomat of the country. That man was treated like that. And similarly, another revealing thing which I would like to share with you. I once was invited by Mr. S.S. Ahluwalia. He had migrated from Congress, he joined BJP. He said, "Hey, come. I was that time in Rajya Sabha, let's have a cup of tea." He said, we wanted Arjun Singh, S.S. Ahluwalia, N.D. Tiwari, they wanted to remove P.V. Narasimha Rao as Prime Minister. And they wanted to make Mr. Narayanan as Prime Minister. Mr. Narayanan was Vice President of India. And I am trying to give this example to identify how caste plays a role. So Mr. Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, obviously he was the Prime Minister, under his command all these agencies are working, Intelligence Bureau, CBI and all that. So Intelligence Bureau informed Prime Minister Manmohan Singh that people are meeting great leaders, Arjun Singh, N.D. Tiwari, they want to throw you out and bring Mr. Narayanan as the Prime Minister of India. And Narayanan will be accepted because of his identity, caste marker. So Mr. Narasimha Rao invited these leaders. He said, well, you want to throw me out and bring Mr. Narayanan? Fine, all right. But have you ever thought what would happen to Mr. Shankar Dayal Sharma while administering oath to Mr. Narayanan? Will he tolerate that? Panditji will collapse while administering oath to Mr. Narayanan. I couldn't understand, sir, why would Panditji will collapse? Sharma ji, President of India. इसलिए यार समझ में नहीं आ रहा है क्या? मिस्टर नारायण का कास्ट क्या है? You see, this is how. I didn't want to share all these details. So the entrenched position of caste inequality is there everywhere. Right at the top, used to subvert the chances of a person coming from humble backgrounds. So therefore, caste census will expose all these privileges. It's a kind of a scanner, X-ray, or a PET scan, whatever you call it, to locate the reasons behind the problem. Remedy, God knows what remedy is required, I don't know. So this is a kind of X-ray, or this is a kind of a technique to first understand what is the disease. Disease is there, of course. If a Panditji would collapse for administering oath to Mr. Narayanan, then so many people would do same thing at the different, layers of society where there is ascending order of reverence and descending order of contempt. I remember when I was an 8th class student, I was telling that experience to Malini. Well, in a village, we never were conscious of caste. A teacher, Sudarshan Tripathi, who was teaching us Sanskrit, he told my father, your son is doing so well, studying so well, and I was so delighted. I told my father, why don't you invite him for food? Because there's some fish curry in my house. Then, the teacher, Tripathi means obviously is a Brahmin. He's a very dedicated teacher. So he left, and my father said, do you think you'll come to our family to have lunch? He appreciated you. He's a good teacher. Then, the reasons behind why he won't come is because of caste. And he never came. And I went and personally said, sir, why didn't you come? He didn't know some other time. You see, he's a great teacher. And he always remembered me after I came for my higher studies and all that. So you see, whether a great teacher, a great doctor, a great politician occupying high constitutional offices, nobody is spared from such problems. So therefore, I'm sorry, sir, what is the time span?
Sir, please carry on. It is more essential for this gathering.
Understand. So therefore, this caste census is is of historic necessity to locate the disease, to what extent the disease has spread in the body politic. It has completely, tried to create a festering sore in society. And that festering sore is deep within. Once we know that, this will in fact take forward the cause of social justice, which is central to the Constitution. So therefore, on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the Constitution of India, when the Constitution was adopted and enacted on 26 November 1949, 4 days later, RSS mouthpiece organizer wrote, there is no reflection of Manusmriti here. It is a borrowed document, and so on and so forth. I mean, so what does Manusmriti represent? Manusmriti represent, even in the words of Swami Vivekananda, a monk of Hindu religion. He said Manusmriti treated people on the basis of caste as beasts of burden for centuries. These are the words of Swami Vivekananda in his lecture from Colombo to Almora after he came back from Chicago. In US and in UK, several lectures he delivered, and he became a celebrity for his exposition of spirituality or Vedanta. But when he came back to India, he critically looked at Hindus. He said, pariahs are deprived of the benefits or the great wisdom associated with Sanskrit. They were prevented to learn Sanskrit. He said if pariahs were deprived of it because of the Brahminical system or system dominated by priests, now education is more required for pariahs than for Brahmins. These are the words of Swami Vivekananda. So therefore, we need to understand at this 75 years after the Constitution of India have been taken forward, and last election how Constitution became an issue, electoral issue for the first time in the history of elections in our country. Be it Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, in UP, he said Samvidhan Khatre mein. This is quite an extraordinary thing, nobody expected it. So people are coming forward. I remember in his last speech in the Constituent Assembly, B.R. Ambedkar said, we have, through this Constitution, are going to set up a democratic form of government. And of course, this Constitution would be there to ensure the operation of the democratic system government. But he said, I am worried and anxious whether we can save the democratic form of government or whether we can save the Constitution. So, right a day before the Constitution was adopted and enacted, worries and anxieties were expressed by the chairman of the drafting committee. That Constitution might be lost, that democratic form might be lost. So that was Ambedkar's worries and anxieties. And worries and anxieties were again reflected by K.R. Narayanan, the President of India, when an attempt was made to review it. Now the anxiety and fear is expressed by ordinary people like you who are defending the human rights. So this is the kind of impact of the Constitution of India. And therefore, caste census is required to understand the extent of the spread of the disease and the extent to which the privileges are enjoyed in a skewed manner by few people who are, there representing the ascending order of reverence. And those people in the descending order of contempt are kept away. For centuries they have been kept away. Even after a revolutionary document like in Constitution of India. But thankfully there is a consciousness now emerging across the country, to defend it, to protect it. And apart from that, for instance, Mandal Commission report which was implemented by VP Singh, Prime Minister, and it was upheld by the Supreme Court in Indira Sahani judgment. But Supreme Court said in that judgment, every 10 years there has to be review to understand who would be kept away from the benefits and who else would be covered by the benefits, 27%. But just imagine, without knowing how many OBCs are there in this country, we are implementing 27%. See, this is a very absurd way of implementing a policy without knowing the numbers. See, normally one has to know the numbers, then only formulate a policy. I remember Mahatma Gandhi once said, Gandhi was favoring prohibition of consumption of liquor by ordinary people for health and for many other reasons. Then he said, we need to have a census of drunkards who are drinking alcohol. I wrote an article in Deccan Herald on the occasion of the Gandhi Jayanti, Gandhi's birth anniversary, 2nd October. I was asked, can you write a piece what are the ideas of Gandhi on census? So the editor contacted me. I said, Gandhi wanted a census of drunkards. Obviously it generates laughter. But then he said, but how to implement a policy prohibition without knowing how many people are drinking? So we have a census to understand how many cows, buffaloes, oxen are there. Even how many elephants are there. I believe the elephant census was kept away from the public domain. And this is it. So that if you are conducting a census of animals, and even Gandhi wanted a census of drunkards, so why not people who are being deprived of opportunity in the name of caste? So what is the hesitation? So, even I remember Gandhi said we need to conduct a census of Kshatriyas in India. Obviously, to my mind, he would have not have opposed to understand this. We have the census being conducted for SCs and STs. It wouldn't take much time or much effort or any resource at all to have another column on caste. Within 45 seconds it will be done by the official who comes to collect census data. Bihar it was done, and it revealed what is the income level of those people who are in the descending order of contempt, what education they have. It was an eye-opening caste survey of the Bihar government. So that is the reason why, when we are at a critical juncture of history, when neoliberalism, as Professor Prabhat Patnaik said, neoliberalism where crony capitalists are being supported by the powers that be or by the regime in India, in US, the way in which they are literally dictating terms for the economy, owning the resources, creating wealth and becoming billionaires in a few years. So it is the inequality in India, social and economic both, is worse than the inequality that prevailed in during British time. So this inequality is further getting worsened because of the caste inequality. So Prabhat Patnaik said, fascism emerged in Europe because of the economic crisis of 1930s. So similarly here, he said Hindutva is nothing but another version of fascism. As Bal Gopal, I saw that frame in my friend Krishna's house. It is not a liberating doctrine, Hindutva. It is a suppressing a thought which sanctifies all oppression and injustice. So therefore, any opposition to caste census, that is coming from the ruling regime in India, is because of that sanctification of the attempts to sanctify all oppressive doctrines and norms and so forth. So it is an attempt to take forward the cause of social justice. It is an attempt to salvage India from the suppressive suppressive Hindutva forces, and plus to uphold the constitution. And apart from that, this caste census, which will reveal the critical data within the government sector. The idea of social justice has to be carried forward in the private sector. It's not just the government sector. I remember President K.R. Narayanan in his last Republic Day Eve speech to the nation on 25th January 2002. He referred to the affirmative action, and then he said affirmative action should now go beyond the government domain. It must be also done in the private sector. And then he reflected. He said in US there is a diversity act, and based on that diversity act, companies have to give a profile. What is the level of extent of representation of diversity in company boards and companies? This is also there in UK. I was reading a report of the House of Commons. He said, why should we have only white judges in the British judiciary? Why not colored Asians and Africans who are the citizens, some of them are citizens of Britain? This idea is emerging across the world and in some of the very developed democratic systems. But here, Mr. Narayanan's articulation in his Republic Day Eve speech on 25th January 2002, that has been, he was the first person occupying the highest office who talked about affirmative action in the private sector. And I remember there is a Parliamentary Committee of India on Social Justice, it also recommended. So, taking into account all these things, caste census is required to make our society more representative. And when you talk of newsrooms, people say, where is the lady in the newsroom? Where is the lady editor? Okay, now this question is asked. Where is a news person or in the newspaper? Where are the OBCs? Where are the SCs and STs? And for the first time, Robin Jaffrey made a study in India. And he telephoned somebody, he said, is there any Dalit reporter or, in the newsroom? And he didn't find anybody at that time. Robin Jaffrey, a foreigner who did it, a remarkable study in the media. So this kind of thinking which are emerging in India, and that is emerging because of Baba Sahib Ambedkar's vision enshrined in the Constitution. There is a book called Debating India by Lord Bhikkhu Parekh. I was reading that book, and there is a reference. When the reservation system was introduced through the constitutional provision, and constitution was being drafted, Sardar Patel went to Ambedkar with a letter that please withdraw reservation system. So Ambedkar read that letter. It is there mentioned in that book, Debating India, by Bhikkhu Parekh, Lord Bhikkhu Parekh, who is there in UK. Ambedkar read that letter. Then he took a plain paper, he wrote another letter, and that letter was his resignation letter as chairman of the drafting board. He said, you want to resolve reservation system, take away my resignation letter. Sardar Patel looked at that letter, he tore it, that resignation letter. Mr. Ambedkar, go ahead. So just imagine, had not been there Ambedkar, what would have happened? So therefore, now Ambedkar's ideas are getting animated across this land.
జోహార్ బాబా సాహెబ్ అంబేద్కర్ కాపాడుకుందాం మన రాజ్యాంగాన్ని జై భీమ్
So this is, in the last assembly elections in Maharashtra, when Batenge, Katenge, some slogan, you might recall, then immediately the leaders of Maharashtra said, no, this is the land of Phule, Ambedkar, Sahuji Maharaj. And that slogan actually didn't work. So the divisiveness, which is integral to this kind of a Hindutva agenda, which Bal Gopal said sanctifies all oppression, can be countered by Phule, Ambedkar, Sahuji Maharaj, or now the essence of that vision, which is enshrined in the Constitution. So thank you so much once again for giving this opportunity to share some thoughts. So I am very grateful to you. Thank you.